I've had Snap Map turned on for years, mostly because my group of friends uses it to figure out who's actually free on a given night instead of texting everyone individually. You get used to seeing everyone's little cartoon avatar sitting on their house or their office, and you stop really thinking about it after a while. It's just background noise on an app I check a dozen times a day anyway. About 2 months ago, I noticed my ex, Derek, was still on my map. We broke up almost a year before that, and I genuinely thought I'd removed him or he'd removed me, one of those things you assume happened without ever confirming it. I saw his Bitmoji sitting near what I guessed was his new apartment one afternoon and didn't think much of it beyond a small normal flinch of seeing an ex's name pop up somewhere. The next week I noticed him again, except this time his little avatar was 3 blocks from my own apartment, at an intersection I recognized because I walk through it to get coffee most mornings. I told myself it was a coincidence. People end up in the same parts of a city all the time, especially a city as small as ours. And he had friends who lived over that way even when we were together. It kept happening though. Over the next couple of weeks, I started noticing his location updated to somewhere near me an unusual amount. Not constantly, but often enough that I started half paying attention to it without meaning to. A grocery store I go to. The block my building is actually on twice. I brought it up to my roommate once, mostly as a joke, saying something like, "It's weird how often my ex is around here now," and she said maybe he moved, which was a reasonable explanation and the one I chose to believe for a while. I looked back through the map's history the best I could, which isn't much since it doesn't keep a real log, just the current position, and tried to figure out if there was some boring explanation, like a mutual friend's location, bleeding through some group setting. I didn't understand. Nothing about the app's settings pages made that seem possible, and the more I read through them, the more certain I became that he specifically had to still be sharing with me, and I with him, for any of this to work the way it apparently was. I decided to test it, more out of curiosity than any real fear at that point. One evening I drove somewhere I never go, a hardware store on the opposite side of town I'd only been to once years earlier for a paint color match. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't post anything. I just drove there, parked, and sat in my car for a minute, watching my own dot settle on the map, like it always does. Derek's dot moved to the same intersection within about 4 minutes. I want to be clear that there's no reasonable way for him to have known where I was. I hadn't shared it anywhere except through the app. He was apparently still watching, and even then, the app doesn't notify anyone when you're just looking at someone's location. It only shows where they are if they've allowed it, which I genuinely thought I'd turned off for him, specifically after we broke up. I sat in that parking lot and watched his little avatar hover near mine for almost 10 minutes before it started moving again, heading in a direction that would put him somewhere close to that same lot within a couple minutes if he kept going. I didn't wait around to see if that was true. I got back on the road and drove straight home, checking my mirrors more than I normally would, and when I got back to my building, I went directly to my car's dash cam, since I have one that saves footage in a loop, and pulled the last 20 minutes onto my phone before it could get overwritten. The footage from the hardware store parking lot shows exactly what I expected for most of it. An empty lot, my own car, nothing moving. Then, at almost precisely the 4-minute mark that matched his dot appearing, A car pulls into the far end of the lot, sits there without anyone getting out, and after about 9 minutes, pulls back out and leaves in the same direction his avatar moved on the map. I couldn't get a clear look at the plate or the driver from that angle, and I've told myself more than once that it could be anyone, any car, a coincidence layered on a coincidence. I removed him from my location, sharing that night, which I'd apparently never actually done the first time, despite thinking I had. I checked the settings 3 times to be sure this time. I haven't seen his dot near me since, but I still glance at my map before I leave my building most days, just to check who's around before I decide which way to walk. I get random snaps from strangers, occasionally the same as anyone who's had the app for years and had their username float around a few group chats that got screenshotted somewhere. Usually it's spam, a bot account, or some teenager trying to build a streak with a random number. I don't think twice about opening them, and I usually just delete whatever it is without replying. About 6 weeks ago, I got a snap from an account with no profile picture, no public story, and a username that was just a random string of letters and numbers, the kind auto-generated when someone doesn't bother picking their own. I opened it expecting spam. Instead, it was a photo of a street at night, taken from a car window based on the angle. Nothing else in frame, no caption. I didn't recognize the street at first. I closed it, muted the account out of habit, and didn't think about it again until 3 days later when the same account sent another photo. This one was clearer, still at night. And it took me a second look to realize it was the intersection 2 blocks from my apartment. The one with the gas station on the corner that's lit up bright enough to photograph well even in the dark. I told myself it was still probably nothing. A bot pulling random street photos for some reason I didn't understand. Or a wrong number of a different kind. Someone who meant to send it to a friend who lived near me and hit the wrong contact. I didn't message back. I blocked the account that time, which felt like the obvious next step once I'd connected the dots on the location. I mentioned the first 2 photos to a coworker over lunch, mostly as a strange story to fill conversation, and she said something similar had happened to a friend of hers a while back. Random photos from a stranger account that eventually just stopped on their own after a few weeks. That made me feel a little better at the time, like this was a known, if uncomfortable, category of internet weirdness rather than something aimed specifically at me. Blocking didn't stop it. A new account, different string of random characters, sent a photo 4 days later. This one was my actual street, the one my building is on, taken from ground level looking toward my front door. I want to be honest that I still didn't call anyone at that point. I told my roommate, who thought it was creepy but assumed, reasonably, that someone had probably taken a photo months ago and an account was just cycling through a batch of old pictures for some spam reason neither of us understood. I wanted to believe that too, mostly because the alternative wasn't something I wanted to sit with. Then on a Tuesday night, a little after 11, a snap came through from yet another new, random account while I was sitting on my own couch. I opened it without thinking, same as every other one. It was a photo of my living room. My actual living room right then, taken from a low angle near my front door, close enough to my own position on the couch that I could see the back of my own head in the corner of the frame. I didn't move for a few seconds, which in hindsight feels like the wrong instinct, but it's the honest one. Then I got up, checked the front door, which was locked, and looked through the peephole, which showed an empty hallway. I checked every window on the ground floor after that, hands not quite steady, and found the kitchen window unlatched. Not open, just unlatched, which I keep locked every single night as a habit from living alone for years. I called my roommate first, who was out that night, and then called a friend to come sit with me until she got home, because I didn't want to be alone in that apartment with a window that shouldn't have been unlatched and a photo of the back of my own head still sitting in my camera roll from a screenshot I'd taken on instinct before the snap disappeared. I moved out of that apartment 2 months later, earlier than my lease technically required, and ate the fee for breaking it early without much hesitation. I still have that screenshot saved, and I still don't know how someone got that angle without being inside the apartment with me, close enough that if I'd turned my head, I would have seen them. I got a quick ad notification about a month ago, one of those suggestions the app gives you based on mutual friends or contacts, the kind you get constantly and mostly ignore. I don't usually accept them unless I recognize the name, but this one had a profile picture that stopped me, an actual photo instead of the usual cartoon Bitmoji, and it looked like it had been taken inside an apartment that looked a lot like mine, same white cabinets, same weird crack in the ceiling, paint above the kitchen that my landlords never bothered to fix. I told myself plenty of apartments in my building probably look similar, since it's the same floor plan repeated for something like 40 units, and a photo of a random kitchen isn't exactly proof of anything. I accepted the ad, mostly out of curiosity, wanting to see if there'd be more context on their story or their other photos that would explain it. There wasn't much else on the account. No public story, a handful of friends I didn't recognize, and a username that was just a first name with some numbers after it. Nothing that told me anything useful. I sent a normal message, something like, "Hey, do I know you?" and didn't get a response for 2 days. When the reply finally came, it was just a snap. No text, a photo of a hallway. Again, it looked like my building, but hallways in apartment complexes look like hallways, beige walls, and identical doors. So I still wasn't convinced of anything specific. I asked again who they were and how they'd gotten my username. No response that time either. Over the next week, I got 3 more snaps from the same account. Always photos, never text. Always somewhere that could plausibly be my building without being definitively, unmistakably my building. A stairwell, a mailroom. The parking garage entrance from an angle I recognized, because I use that exact entrance every day. I brought it up to a neighbor I'm friendly with, mostly to ask if she'd gotten any weird quick ads lately, and she said no, but agreed. The photos sounded like they could be anywhere in the building, since it really does look that uniform floor to floor. That didn't make me feel better so much as it made me realize I couldn't rule anything out just from the photos alone. She did mention, almost as an afterthought, that the leasing office had sent out a notice a few months back about someone using a spare key to get into the parking garage after hours, though nothing had apparently been taken and management hadn't seemed too concerned about it. Then, on a Thursday night, the account sent a video call request instead of a snap. I almost declined it. I sat there with my thumb over the decline button for a solid 10 seconds. And then some combination of curiosity and wanting this to finally just be explained made me answer instead. The video connected to a dark room, camera pointed at the ceiling. No one visible, no audio besides faint static. I said hello twice, got nothing back. I was about to hang up when whoever was holding the phone tilted it down toward the floor slow, and for maybe 2 full seconds before the call cut out entirely, I saw a stretch of hallway carpet with a very specific, very ugly geometric pattern. The exact pattern in the hallway, right outside my own apartment door. I hung up, or the call ended on its own. I genuinely couldn't tell you which happened first. I went straight to my own front door, looked through the peephole, and saw nothing but the empty hallway I just watched 2 seconds of on a screen. I opened the door anyway, stepped out, and stood there in that hallway for a solid minute, looking both directions at exactly nothing, before going back inside and locking both the deadbolt and the chain, which I don't normally bother with. I blocked and reported the account that night. It hasn't come back under a new one, at least not one I've noticed, but I've started using the stairwell camera app my building has instead of the peephole. And I don't answer video calls from accounts I don't already know, no matter how the profile picture looks.